My name's Jennifer Baublitz. I am a military spouse of more than 22 years. I'm also the executive director of a small nonprofit called Homefront Strong. We do have a core constituency where we, engage veterans and military families through local programming. However, our two key programs are Connects and Storytelling, and those span, as I mentioned before, geographically throughout New England. Connects is a basic community peer support program. So essentially through Connects, what we do is we recruit military connected individuals, anybody who identifies as service member, veteran, or family member. We provide them with a baseline training on how to establish a helping community relationship. We talk about things like building trust through active listening skills, setting appropriate boundaries, military culture, risk and resilience factors associated with the military life cycle, as well as resources available to veterans and military families in the state of Massachusetts and New England. And we match those individuals with other service members, veterans, and their family members in the community who are looking for stopgap types of support. So oftentimes these are people who just want to chat with somebody who is non-clinical outside of their immediate social circle, but has some shared experience with the military life cycle. Sometimes it's homebound veterans who are lonely, so we'll match somebody with them. And other times it's very specific. Somebody's looking for assistance accessing resources, benefits, you name it, and we have some volunteers. A lot of our volunteers, as a matter of fact, are highly trained retired professionals who have done that work in their previous, in a previous lifetime. So we're able to match them, and that's Connects. The other side of that program is our storytelling program. So our storytelling program actually originated as an entry point for Connects. Essentially, when we were the Brookfield Institute, our founder and previous executive director, Beverly Presswood Taylor, would work with Vietnam veterans on submitting their stories to the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. If you're unfamiliar with the Veterans History Project, it's very specific. Back in the day, it was only open to combat veterans for some story submissions, as well as Gold Star families. And it's very much a documentary type of story. It is uncut, unedited. There's a lot of clerical work that goes along with the process, and it's just there for posterity's sake. The Veterans History Project now accepts stories from all individuals who identify as veteran on the federal level, but it's still very much the same process. When we developed our Connects program, which again is community peer support, we were looking for an easy entry point for individuals who didn't necessarily want to say, I'm lonely, I want someone to chat with, or I need help or assistance, but might be more willing to say, oh yeah, let's tell some stories. Storytelling is so powerful. It covers so many social determinants of health. It addresses a sense of belonging, meaning, purpose, hope. And what we did is we took the basic storytelling model and we really developed it. We developed it so that it's rooted more in that community helping relationship, that it's, that the individuals who are trained in the storytelling process are trained through that lens of establishing a trusting relationship and safe space for individuals to tell their stories. It very much mirrors narrative therapy, but it is non-clinical, and it helps individuals to communalize their experiences. They communalize the traumas, the triumphs, and they get to recall stories of resilience and really integrate that into their identity. And for the listener, the volunteer on the other side of the story, it can be equally as rewarding and enriching. So storytelling really has taken off and somewhat taken over for us at Homefront Strong. We've developed a whole new workshop rooted in that model, as well as an interactive storytelling guide. My background is public education. So I am a licensed school teacher, a licensed school counselor, and I have a continued advanced graduate degree in building resilience for helping professionals. So for the whole first part of my career, I worked in public education. I had 2 kids of my own, And my husband, who still serves, he is active Guard Reserve with the 1/3 out of Bradley in Connecticut. He was still very much actively deploying all the time. And I have had to always maintain a very flexible schedule because of my husband's military service. So I left public education, seeing as how it there's not a whole lot of opportunity for flexibility, even though one might think, you get your summers off, your vacations that align with your kids. Unless you're in the same system as your kids, it doesn't work as cleanly. And it was kind of by chance that I found an opportunity to manage a program called Shoulder to Shoulder. And they were very specifically looking for somebody with a mental health background and some lived experience with the military. I have always accessed the civilian healthcare system. What is unique in New England in terms of service is that large military installation that houses everything you need, that large military community where everybody gets it, where everybody's spouse is coming and going, where kids are watched after by the next door neighbor. As a matter of fact, where we live geographically, we happen to be approximately 1 hour away from any major military installation. So that is my husband's commute to work. That is how far he drives whenever he needs to see a medical provider. But as far as myself and my children are concerned, it's all civilian health care. As far as I'm concerned, given my background and my understanding of a biopsychosocial model and the importance of the impact the military lifestyle has on us physiologically, psychologically, and even physically, depending on where you live and what your job may be, and if you're the service member. I have always discussed it because I know better, right? Because I know. However, in terms of has that information ever been solicited from me? No. It's not really a question I've ever come across. I have to offer the information, and even at that, it depends on the provider insofar as how much they then seek out. It doesn't always get absorbed into the conversation. And unless we're talking about what my health insurance is, the topic of military doesn't really come up. I think my ability to add that to the conversation absolutely improved the experience, the overall, approach, and in terms of, just a more comprehensive, holistic, like I said, that biopsychosocial model where, I've had healthcare providers who were pretty competent, and once they knew that was part of the picture, and if, say, my husband were gone, they knew to check in on, the degree of social support I was able to access, and how well the kids were doing, and whether or not, we were connected with the school providers, and they were aware of the situation, and so forth and so on. And then it snowballs, right? As long as you have the baseline information, you can start asking the broad questions and digging a little bit more. Had I not mentioned it, it wouldn't come up in conversation. And even at that, like I said, there are certain providers for whom even having that information didn't necessarily lead to a line of questioning that could be helpful. If the provider doesn't ask or at least appear to be curious, they're not going to offer that information because right away there's a barrier. I definitely have worked with veterans for whom they don't want to discuss it. There are a lot of individuals in that generation who post-service, given the social implications of that conflict and everything that service members went through, they decided, I'm done. And as long as nobody asks, they're not going to bring it up. It prevents their provider from fully caring for them. It also prevents them from accessing a lot of benefits, potential benefits, that they are, privy to. I've also worked with individuals for whom, the civilian healthcare system is extremely frustrating. They feel as though their military service is not acknowledged, or they haven't been asked about their service. There's that sense of, psychological disconnect or cultural disconnect there. And quite frankly, for a great number of veterans and service members, they don't have access to VA healthcare. VA healthcare is only available to a small subset of our veterans, right? There are, service-connected disability requirements, or there are income requirements. And if you happen to serve Guard or Reserve and you are from a time prior to 9/11, the odds that you met that federal definition of veteran in order to access VA healthcare, they're kind of slim. If you just ask the basic question, have you or anyone in your family served before? You open the door. And from there, it's follow-up questions. It can be a little bit of research. It's just understanding that individual, what their experience was, being aware of the fact that military experience looks very different from branch to branch, from job to job, among rank, among, different regions in the country. It looks vastly different. So just being open and aware and practicing cultural humility can go a very long way when it comes to talking to a veteran. Traditionally, we would talk about cultural competence. And cultural competence is all about openness and being aware to other cultures and trying to understand as much as you can about other cultures. Whereas humility acknowledges the fact that it's kind of impossible for us to gather enough knowledge about all the different cultural nuances out there to be competent in a great number of cultures. It's being open and recognizing that we have cultural awareness and there's a lot we don't know. So we are continuously learning about other cultures and experiences, and continuously asking questions and updating our knowledge and behavior accordingly. Just showing a curiosity and interest and acknowledging that military service has a huge impact on all those social determinants of health, in addition to an individual's development and, again, their physiological stress response, which of course is going to dictate how they move through life moving forward. So just having the basic knowledge to ask those questions, and then being open to the answers, not flinching, right, at the answers, just being aware that sometimes you're going to hear hard things. Sometimes that individual, you never know when you touch a nerve and there's a lot of anger or grief lying under the surface, right? Just being aware that that's a possibility, but also being open to just listening and witnessing and learning more. If we're learning anything as modern medicine progresses, it's that doctors are humans too. They're definitely not expert in everything. And I know just personally, I value a doctor who is willing to say, oh, well, let's learn about that and let's figure it out together, and recognize when individuals have a personal experience and are in touch with their own needs and experience and have some agency over that. And it's just really important to acknowledge for anyone, and especially, of course, veterans and military service members. That's my big push, is that we are for service members, veterans, and their family members. You cannot care for a service member or veteran without ensuring that their family of origin or whomever they're going home to is also well taken care of. It's very much family systems dynamics, right? Access to community supports, and especially during military service, if the deployment cycle is a factor, or that individual is, serving in a way that takes them away frequently on trainings, or, has them serving different shifts. It's extremely important to make sure the family at home is able to adapt to that situation. For military families, the deployment cycle it's huge. The single most important factor for the health and well-being of, if there are kids involved, is the health and well-being of that caregiver at home, so whomever that spouse is. So if there is a deployment or a separation, or a PCS coming up, knowing that everything that goes into that, whether it's the build up or the reintegration when somebody comes home, that's going to have a huge impact on mental health and behavior for all members of the family and for the unit as a whole. It never fails when someone's deployed, something catastrophic happens at home, right? And sometimes it's simple, like the one time my husband was, I don't know, somewhere in the Middle East, and I woke up to a hissing sound, and it was a burst pipe in the basement. It was relatively simple, right? But it never fails. We are susceptible to autoimmune disorders that tend to be triggered by stress, and have a typical onset as we get a little bit older. So there are just so many factors associated with the military life cycle while you're in and out that impact, yes, not only the service member and veteran, but definitely the family at home. Most military kids, most military families, most spouses are actually remarkably resilient. They have a lot of strengths associated with what the lifestyle demands of them. I know with my own 2 kids, they're very flexible, they can adapt. When my husband's not around, they step up, they're helping out, they're very responsible. And again, that's true for the adults as well. I mean, a lot of individuals who serve have, tremendous capacity for strength and resilience. And it's equally as important, yes, the medical model, unfortunately, is rooted in pathology, but as we slowly, hopefully shift to a more, preventative, holistic approach, really kind of celebrating and capitalizing on those strengths, helping kids recognize just how much is asked of them and how much they've been able to do in their time as they have, supported the family unit throughout their parents' service, is equally as important to their overall health and well-being as addressing symptoms of a trauma or, a disruption in a particularly important developmental period. But then, of course, really focusing on those familial relationships, that family unit is key to kids and their development. It's key to their resilience. We know, especially in significantly formative periods, early childhood, early adolescence, when the brain is really really growing and they're growing very fast, that relationships are paramount. Establishing trust, healthy attachment styles. So yes, it's paying special attention to the kids and really helping to reinforce those resilience factors they are able to develop, but then also just making sure that the family unit is operating well, that those relationships, those core, those adults, those caregivers in the unit are also, their mental health and well-being is taken care of is essential. As someone who is a licensed public educator, I also actually teach graduate students who are looking to become school counselors as well, and clinicians and service providers. It never fails to amaze how infrequently families will mention to the school counselor or teacher, oh, hey, by the way, my spouse is deployed. It's crucial that the adults in a child's life are aware when there are, significant challenges that they're facing, and any type of separation, whether it's due to deployment or like I said, a TDY training or something along those lines, that can be significant for a child, especially if the caregiver at home is going through something. I do know and work with a few women veterans who are of the post 9/11 generation, who are still actively raising their kids and have gone through the deployment. And absolutely, there's a big difference. First of all, nobody ever assumes mom is the one who's deployed, right? Nobody ever assumes that. And, for a lot of families, and whether it's cultural or biological, mom is oftentimes the primary parent. I've known single moms who have served and deployed, and their kids are taken care of by grandma and grandpa. And that can be particularly challenging for the grandparents. It's a whole new world when it comes to child rearing. That looks very different from when they raise their own kids, and it requires a ton of energy, and there's almost no support for those family units. That burden that tends to be outsized for women, the guilt around deploying. I'm thinking of a dear friend in particular. She served for a full career, and she's very proud of her service. She loves the military. She would do it all over again. And she raised 3 kids at the same time. And yes, of course she didn't love deploying while her kids are at home, but she also was very proud of what she did. So, it's really hard for her when people will say things like, how could you leave your kids? How could you do that? And it's not something men hear. Don't assume you know what that service looked like. Just don't, because like I said, it looks so different from one service member or veteran or whole family to the next. And if the care provider across the way makes an assumption about them because of their service in Vietnam, the likelihood that that barrier is going to go up is pretty high. Just the baseline knowledge and awareness, just acknowledging, again, the impact military service has on a person on a biopsychosocial, cellular level, just having that built in to the process, because it is crucial to actually understanding the individual sitting across from you and what could potentially be going on, right? And how you might approach that. That's also very important, the how, the execution of it all, right? What are you recommending to that individual? How do they feel about meds or psychotropics or this? What are some potential leftover hangups from the military? Or is it about lacking social connections and camaraderie and those social determinants of health? So it's one, just the acknowledgement, and two, just that baseline knowledge that you know enough to ask a few more questions, and to know that there might be something available to that person that's going to be much more helpful than what you may have recommended had they not served.